Recent reporting indicates that crucial swing voters are starting to hold Donald Trump and the Republican Party accountable for their cynical killing of a bipartisan border bill, suggesting that there may indeed be electoral consequences for the GOP before the November election. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bell before you go. I'd greatly appreciate it. All right, friends, this is awesome news, although I will say we are still many, many, many months away from the election. It's entirely possible that the winds will shift once again or are shifting in a positive direction, but not sufficient for Democrats to eke out a victory. But the situation is this. Republicans have been moving away from the economy in terms of their major focus issue, their major, the thrust of their re-election bid, right? The economy is objectively good, at least based on the macroeconomic metrics that we've always used to evaluate the economy, such that Donald Trump is actually trying to take credit for it now. Instead, what they're trying to do is focus on immigration. And they enjoy, generally speaking, a polling advantage with respect to immigration. They're freaking everybody out. They're fear-mongering. And then on top of all that, they killed a bipartisan border bill designed to address it. But now polling suggests, and focus groups of swing voters suggest, that Republicans may accrue a political consequence for their bad faith. But just to recap the situation with the border bill, here's Democratic Senator Chris Coons.
President Biden made a very forceful case for border security last night, for the conservative compromise bill that Republican Senator James Lankford of Oklahoma crafted with Democratic Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut. We were on the verge of passing it. It would have hired thousands more Border Patrol agents, put $20 billion into securing our border and combating fentanyl, and only because former President Trump called his allies here in the Senate and said, wait, we don't want to fix the border after all. I want an issue for the election, that we did not take it up and pass it. President Biden challenged the Congress to pass that bipartisan bill. I hope we will.
And again, that recitation is pretty much accurate. The fact of the matter is, the second most conservative Republican in the United States Senate, James Lankford, who was endorsed for re-election by Donald Trump, in part because he's so hawkish on the border, and, conservative, centrist-y type Kyrsten Sinema, she was also a primary architect, as well as Democratic Senator Chris Murphy. So this was like a trifecta situation. They negotiated this relatively conservative bill such that even the pro-Trump, anti-Biden Border Patrol Union endorsed it, okay? Nobody got everything they wanted. Again, it's relatively conservative, so I understand why those of us on the progressive left take issue with it. But it effectively gave more to Republicans than it denied them, and they had no real incentive to not pass the bill except for to use it as a political wedge issue for Donald Trump. And yet recent reporting from Axios says that swing voters in Wisconsin, okay, which is one of the purplest battleground states in the United States, they're blaming Republicans and Donald Trump for this. Wisconsin swing voters largely blame Republicans, and specifically Donald Trump, for Congress's failure to pass bipartisan legislation to help improve border security, according to our latest Engagius-Sajo focus group. Interviews with voters, this is critical, voters who backed Trump in 2016 and flipped to Biden in 2020, so people who voted for both, suggest a Biden State of the Union speech left them feeling that Trump's GOP is more responsible for Washington's lack of action, which is true. And it goes into the details about the border plan, which we just discussed. With the State of the Union, Biden successfully got swing voters mad at Trump for tanking a congressional deal on immigration, said Engagius President Rich Thau, who moderated the panels. The problem for Biden, though, is that these same voters still trust more to fix the border mess, right? So again, there is a lot of ground that we have to make up for. So they say, yeah, Trump in cynical bad faith killed a really good option to do it, but if he's firing on all cylinders, we trust him more to handle it. But that's where the ground the Democrats have to make up is. Fortunately for them, we have some opportunity to do that. Chris Murphy, the Democratic architect or co-architect of that particular bill, tweeted this a couple of weeks ago. He says, new polling suggests that when Democrats explain how Republicans killed the toughest border bill in decades, Republicans' 15-point advantage disappears. It's time to go on the offense. And he's absolutely correct. This is from third way polling. Immigration is a high salience issue for voters, and Democrats are underwater on it. It's just simply the fact. Now, I don't think that immigration, the so-called border crisis, is nearly as important as it is to voters, but that is the voter perception, right? I don't think it should be the number one issue on people's minds, but some polling suggests that it is, at least right now, in large part because Republicans have aggressively pushed it. The Senate bipartisan border deal is popular, and if Democrats own it, they can flip the script with skeptical voters while keeping their base intact. Again, this is according to the top line notes from Third Way's polling. Here's the key part. While Republicans start with a 15-point advantage on their approach to immigration and the border, a Democratic offensive strategy touting the deal completely erases that edge. So listen, let's be clear. It's very unlikely, it's possible but unlikely, the Democrats will ever have the advantage or a decisive advantage on this issue, but we can absolutely close the gap. We can deny them, we can nullify their advantage and make it even terrain. Between these bits of information, the focus groups, the polling, President Biden's rapid response team on Twitter, they're very happy with it. Turns out voters blame the party that killed the border deal for killing the border deal. So they're pretty happy with that. And it's not just the border bill. I also pointed this out, and I used some salty language to do it, but there's recent reporting from NBC that scanners that, well, this video thing's in the way, scanners that smuggled fentanyl at the border sit unused because Congress hasn't provided cash to install them. The money to install the screeners was the supplemental funding request Republicans blocked. So Republicans are blocking a supplemental funding request, which would allow Border Patrol and the Department of Homeland Security to install these screeners, which would help us interdict fentanyl, which would reduce fentanyl dispersion in the United States and therefore fentanyl deaths. Republicans are single-handedly responsible for that because, again, they want to use it as a wedge issue to hurt the president and Democrats. And given how Republicans use aggressive rhetoric all the time, right, particularly with respect to Laken Riley, an American citizen who was killed by an undocumented immigrant, we have not heard the end of that, right? Republicans have been hitting Democrats hard on it. They have been, by their logic, right, politicizing her death in a way that they finger wag at Democrats that Democrats should never do when there are mass and school shootings as a result of lax Republican policy on gun control. You can't politicize those deaths, but you can politicize Laken Riley's death. Well, if they blame Democrats for that, and Republicans have used very vicious, cruel language that Joe Biden is responsible for Laken Riley's death, well, then by this logic, we should be saying something similar. I said, so maybe Dems should be saying something like, Republicans are knowingly killing Americans by gleefully blocking fentanyl scanners to hurt Joe Biden politically, or whatever you want. Republicans are killing Americans happily in order to hurt Joe Biden politically by blocking these scanners, as well as other things as well. But this is good news in terms of the polling and the focus groups. That means, folks, that electorally, there is an opportunity here for Democrats to either gain an advantage or at the very least mitigate the Republicans' advantage. This is good. This is why we should pursue an aggressive, relentless, consistent, offensive messaging strategy. I don't see any reason to cede the ground or be reactive in this respect. Let's just try it. Maybe it doesn't work. Maybe it won't work. Maybe Republicans are uniquely poised and capable of setting the media narrative. That's possible, but we won't know until we try. And so I think we should try. And there's evidence to suggest it would be enormously beneficial in a very tight election. Let me know what you think in the comments.